accompanying with it. But I put a little yellow piece of tape at the top of it and a yellow piece of tape down by the spokes. So when this makes one complete revolution, you would think, well, this is not going to go as far, right? It's traveling a smaller circumference, so that's going to obviously win. If I make one complete revolution, that's going to get back there first. But I'm going to tell you that they're always going to get back at the same time. Through the laws of physics, if I spin this one rotation and stop it, they're always coming back at the exact same time. So they're traveling, we're telling you that they're going to finish that one revolution at the same time. So that one revolution is like RPM. But how far the track and the track circumference was, how far the ball actually had to cover in that one revolution, tells you how fast it's going. So which part of this tape, up top or down by the spokes, do you think is traveling faster? Top, right? Reason being, it has to travel a farther distance in the same amount of time as this does. Because they're both finishing at the same exact time. But this is traveling a farther distance. So even though it doesn't look like it to our naked eye, this is moving at a faster rate of speed. So in terms of ball motion and getting our ball into the right phases, the hook phase and the roll phase especially, this is why tilt matters, track circumference. For every 7 degrees that you change your axis tilt, whether it goes down or whether it goes up, that is 2 inches of track circumference that you've changed. That's a pretty big deal. So for every RPM, you're covering either 2 more inches of the bowling ball or 2 less inches of the bowling ball. That means the ball is going to be spinning at different rates of speed. So a few different examples of release ratio. This first one, we're going to say he throws it at 18 miles per hour. He or she, sorry, didn't mean to be sexist there. He or she throws it at 18 miles per hour with 300 RPM and 3 degrees of tilt, which equates to 26 inches of track circumference. And then we have bowler B over there that's going to throw it at 18 miles per hour with 300 RPM and 24 degrees of tilt, which equates to 20 inches of track circumference. Now, when most people would go watch these people bowl at a bowling center, they're going to see the 18 miles per hour and the 300 RPM and say, yeah, these guys throw it alike. They're going to be exactly the same. But what I'm going to show you is that they're not. In terms of release ratio, taking their initial ball speed and dividing that by the spin speed, which is RPM plus tilt, you have to convert that over into miles per hour. There's a formula that we have that converts that over into miles per hour. But bowler A has a release ratio of 2.43. 2.43 means the ball is traveling down the lane almost 2.5 times as fast as it's spinning off the player's hand. Make sense, everybody? Then we have player B. So same 18 miles per hour, same 300 RPM, but because player A is covering 6 inches of track circumference more every single rotation, that release ratio is 3.16 versus 2.43. So now we have a 3-to-1 ratio as opposed to the 2.43 or 2.5-to-1 release ratio. So you say, well, you know, that's not a huge difference. But when we're talking about inches and at the most feet determining whether the ball is getting into the roll phase and whether we're really optimizing what we can do as a player, that extra half of a release ratio makes a big difference. So the reason that those variables are so changing is that player A has, their ball is spinning at 7.39 spin speed or miles per hour. I've converted it over into miles per hour. So that 3 degrees of tilt with those other variable numbers, 18 miles per hour ball speed and 300 RPM, means the ball is actually spinning at 7.4 roughly miles per hour. Player B, with that same 18 miles per hour, with 300 RPM, covering 6 less inches of track circumference, now the ball's spinning 5.6 miles per hour. So more than 1.5 miles per hour difference that the ball is actually spinning. So in terms of how these balls are going to read the lane, how they're going to go through the pins, who's going to bowl well on certain type conditions, these two players may be drastically, not drastically different, but they may be considerably different. All things created equal. So that's why tilt plays such a huge, huge role in why the ball is doing what it's doing as it's rolling down the lane. Okay, so here's some visuals as to what's happening when your ball is going down the lane. So we have speed up top, and we're just going to say that this player throws the ball at 20 miles per hour off their hand. As they release the bowling ball, it's going to stay relatively constant. It's always going to lose speed. The second the ball hits the lane, it's going to be the fastest it's ever traveling. It can never go faster than when it initially leaves your hand, unless you are bowling on a lane that's very, very much tilted the wrong way. Then it could possibly go faster. But in terms of all USBC specifications, 40 thousandths of an inch, the ball is never going to pick up speed. It's always going to slow down. And then we have the spin speed down below. And let's say through the equation and we did the conversion, that ball is spinning at 10 miles per hour. And as that ball hits the lane, it's always going to be spinning at the lowest rate it ever will. As the ball travels down the lane, the RPMs are going to increase. As it encounters friction, RPMs are going to go faster. So that's going to increase. And what we want to have happen, that equaling a 2-to-1 ratio. Ball traveling at 20 miles per hour, but spinning at 10 miles per hour. 2-to-1 ratio. So what we want to have happen is right before that ball hits the pins, that ball speed comes down, the spin speed goes up, and they equal each other right as they hit the pins. That is what the roll phase is. That happens right before the pins. That's where that great carry percentage, that's where Del quits, all that stuff comes back into play. So let's say we have that same bowler, but now the lanes have gotten dried up, just for the wear and tear, they haven't really moved anywhere. But they're still throwing it at 20 miles per hour. Their ball is still spinning at 10 miles per hour. That ratio is still 2-to-1. But because now they're encountering more friction earlier, that ball starts to lose speed a little bit faster. And that ball speed comes down that much quicker. Conversely, as the ball speed is going to go down, it has to bring up the revolution rate, or the RPM speed, the spin speed. So let's say that happens too early now, because now that ratio is no longer good for the lane they're bowling on. The lane's constantly changing. Ball motion is ball motion, but the lane's constantly in transition from one shot all the way through the rest of the time. So what happens is if that ratio gets too early, and those start to meet, and the ball gets into the roll phase too soon, and too far before the head pin, we've all heard of dead-on arrival. Ball's rolling out is a term that we used to use back in the day. Hits that roll phase too soon. Has too much room to carry, too many feet to go before it hits the pins, ball's going to hit the pin and deflect. So let's go back to that very first slide where that one person's release ratio of 2-to-1 is perfect. We're going to go back to that pattern, and we're going to say now we have a player that throws at 21 miles per hour, but their spin speed is only 7 miles per hour. So their ball revolution-wise, their RPM plus tilt is only 7 miles per hour, equaling a ratio of 3-to-1. Pretty simple math. So now that player is on that same pattern that the first player we showed was matching up beautifully with a 2-to-1 ratio. Well, this ball is going to go a little bit longer before it starts to lose the majority of the speed. And it's going to go a little bit longer before the ball starts to spin faster. So what ends up happening, and this is where I go back to that slide of about 80% of bowlers, this is what happens with the majority of bowlers. The ball is still traveling faster than it is actually spinning when it hits the head pin, meaning it's still in the hook phase. Ball's going to hit the pins, more deflection. You're going to leave ring tens, half tens, because really, in the grand scheme of things, if we had a pin deck right here, touching the head pin isn't the most important part of what goes on. It's what happens from the time the ball hits the head pin to the time it hits the 3-pin. How much deflection is happening? What angle have we lost? You generally want to lose about 3 degrees from touching that head pin perfectly in the pocket to where you want to encounter the 3-pin in order to throw a perfect strike. So if we lose more than that, the 3-pin, you're going to hit the 3-pin too solid, 6-pin's going to go to the sidewall, and then you're taking luck into the equation. Whether you have enough power to really kick the 6-pin out of the gutter, or whether you're just going to leave flat 10 after flat 10 after flat 10. So, for example, going back to this first person who was matched up beautifully and taking this bowler A, or this bowler C, let's say, into consideration, if that 2-to-1 ratio was perfect for that day, and they're just hitting the pocket, and this bowler's hitting the pocket, but they just can't knock them over. So what they need to do is close up that ratio. So they either need to slow down their ball speed, so it's not starting from such a high point, or they need to make their spin speed faster. So either increase their RPMs, or there's another variable they can do that takes out all the equation of the actual player, and that's add surface. Because adding surface to the bowling ball is going to make those two things happen at a quicker rate of speed. So yes, it may start off at a 3-to-1 ratio, but that surface is going to make it encounter friction faster and make those two come together and hopefully get into the roll phase at the correct time. Okay? Okay, so this is the next question we always get. It's pretty much like lockjaw that it comes out of everybody's mouth. What is the proper release ratio? Here we go. There isn't a perfect ratio because the lane's always changing. 2-to-1 ratio, 2.5-to-1 ratio might be great at the start of the block, but then all of a sudden you need to adjust it. So you really just need to watch the bowling ball as it's rolling down the lane. So there isn't a perfect ratio. It's also very dependent on initial ball speed. Because if you throw a bowling ball at 20 miles per hour, that's going to take roughly 2 seconds to get down the lane. So the ball's only on the lane for 2 seconds. So if you have a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio with a 20 mile per hour initial ball speed, the ball's not on the lane for a long enough period of time to decrease and really get into that roll phase. Or conversely, if you have a 2-to-1 ratio, but you only throw it 15 miles per hour, the ball's going to be on the lane for an extra second, let's say. So when the ball's on the lane for 3 seconds, that ratio is too close together. So lower initial ball speeds need wider ratios. Faster initial ball speeds need ratios that are closer together. That's why you look at any of the two-handed players. The reason that they can throw it, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. You know, do they throw it that fast because they have that much spin speed? Or because they have that much spin speed, do they throw it that fast? You know, it's almost one of those things. But because they're throwing it, they have 575 to 650 RPMs, depending on who you're measuring. And more than likely, most times their tilts are very low as well. So less tilt means more track circumference. So for every rotation, that ball is really humming. That ball is spinning at a very quick rate of speed. So 20 to 21 miles per hour is only about a 2-to-1 ratio. Their ball spin speed is in excess of 10 miles per hour, every single one of them. So depending on initial ball speed is very important. But we have seen trends. You know, like I said, this is something that we started to do a while back. And Rod first initially developed this. I want to definitely give him the props and the sort of footnote Rod in developing this a while back. But the funny part is this came from how I got brought into it. It came from a friend of mine who's a golf instructor. He used to bowl. Now he's a well-known golf instructor, and he just loves to learn. And he loves to learn still about everything in general. He's still interested in bowling. He hasn't thrown a bowling ball since about 1996 or 97, but he still loves to learn about bowling. So he came into town to give some putting exhibition type thing, some putting class. And what he did was he started asking me about bowler variables. You know, well, revolutions. Well, doesn't it mean if somebody has 400 revolutions, but they're spinning it more, doesn't that make a difference than somebody who's not spinning it and has 400 revolutions? And my answer was, maybe. You know, I never really thought about it before. So I went and talked to Rod, and Rod's like, oh yeah. Yeah, we talked about that about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I really just kind of let it go. It didn't really take off all that well, but now I'm like, well, geez, to me, this is bowling. This is the modern day bowling. It's a more accurate measurement for what the bowler is doing to a bowling ball. The more data you can compile for the player, the more accurate you can make in selections. So I kind of got off on a tangent there, but. So the trends that we see. So this is last year's Team USA men's team. So the release ratios are going up the left side of the graph. The initial ball speeds are going across the bottom of the graph. Now there's one thing that kind of stands out to me is that, yeah, you see some differences, but really we see a big cluster. 8 out of the 10 people all roughly are around that 1.75 to 2.5 release ratio. Now, are they doing that on purpose? No. But one thing that we like to say in the training center is that the bowlers are going to tell us how to teach. You know, if you see something happen over and over and over and over again, and all the best players in the world are doing it, more than likely there's a reason that it's working. Same sort of thing. So we're looking at the highest men level and noticing that most of their release ratios tend to be right around 2-to-1. Some a little bit lower, some a little bit faster, but right around 2-to-1 ratio, meaning their ball is traveling down the lane 2 times as fast as it's spinning. We have a few outliers up there. I won't name names who those outliers are. But if you think of men's Team USA and think of who throws the ball hard, you may be able to come up with something out there. So here's Team USA women. Once again, release ratio going up the left side, ball speed going on the bottom. You can see they're much more scattered out. That's because we have a much more bigger variety of initial ball speed. But once again, right in the middle, we have 5 out of the 10, so 50%, all clustering around that 3 to 3.5 mark. So once again, we're going to say that the best players in the world, we're all products of our environments as a player. You're going to adjust to what you learn in order to see proper ball motion. You're not just, if you're a good bowler and you're competing at the highest level, you're just not going to leave a half 10 every 8 out of 10 shots you throw. You're going to make adjustments, whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously. You're going to start making adjustments. You know, I grew up in upstate New York. Pretty much burnt old wood lanes where the front part of the lane was just, really destroyed. If anybody's ever been to upstate New York in the 80s, yeah, you can attest to that. And so when I was growing up, I had a lot of tilt. I had a smaller track circumference. And it wasn't because I wanted to throw it that way. I was just a product of my environment. I knew I needed to get the ball through the front part of the lane, and I also did it through loft too. Anybody who's ever seen me bowl knows that. Throw the ball way too far out of the lane. But those are the two things that I did to kind of combat, to almost make that ratio stay wider. Even though there were no such things as ratios back then, but there still were. We wanted to get the ball into the roll phase. And I was subconsciously making those adjustments and making it wider. So we're all products of our environment. So the players will tell you where you kind of want to fit. So this is a Team USA, and we have the 5 people roughly in the middle. Like I said, there's always going to be some outliers that fit in there. But that's roughly, it's cool to see a trend like that. So you can say, well, okay, well, that's 10 guys and 10 girls. What kind of trend is that? Well, so then we did it, and we added a lot more people that we've tracked over the last little while. And that red line that's going through, that's like the trend line, if you want to call it sort of like a medium or middle or average type, you can do that. That's the trend line of where all the release ratios, not every single one, but the majority of the elite level players that we've tracked, where they fit. So, if you can see my little pointer here, the people who fall well below this line here, well below that trend line, that means their release ratios are pretty slow for their initial ball speed. That person is going to struggle getting the ball to retain enough energy and retain the hook phase and have a long enough skid phase to really have the ball hit the pins with its maximum power. Their ball is going to be dead on arrival, often more times than not. Unless they bowl on tighter volume, heavier volume, longer oil patterns. That's when these people that are kind of trending below this line are really going to succeed. When there's more oil on the lane, longer volume, because their ball's not going to want to be so close together. Conversely, people that find themselves way up here in this top part, they're going to be the opposite. If you put them on longer volume, or heavier volume, longer oil patterns, they're going to really struggle to get the ball in the roll phase. The ball's not going to slow down fast enough, and it's not going to speed up enough to equal that roll phase before the head pivot. It's really tough to get their ball into the roll phase. So that's basically the trend line. And you can see right when you get around 18 to 19 and a half, we're talking about 2.25 or so. And as we throw faster, you can see as the ball gets faster, the initial ball speed gets faster, then that ratio is going to come down. They're elite players. So if they throw it that fast, they have to spin it that fast as well. It just has to be that way, or else they're not going to be elite. They're going to be 175 average in your local bowling center. Okay, so release ratio summary. What it kind of all means. It's really the player's ability to achieve the roll phase. How easy is it for one player to get their ball rolling through the pin deck versus another? It's also one of the main reasons why you hear that term match up. I hate the term. Nobody bowls bad anymore. It's crazy because everybody didn't match up. Well, in terms of matching up, this is kind of the reason why people didn't match up. Really, in terms of Pro Shop, we do a lot with Pro Shop stuff here, as well as that it's more specific for ball drillings and layouts. Because I know those 3 variables, how fast they throw it, how fast it's rotating, and at how much track circumference each rotation is covering, somebody can come up to me and say, my release ratio is 2.54, and I'm looking for a ball for a longer oil pattern with less volume. I can pretty much, I don't even need to see a bowl after that. I know how fast their ball is traveling versus how fast it's spinning, and I know what we want to do to make those adjustments to make everything try and happen at the right time. And then lastly, in terms of team play, who to play. How do we do that? Well, who to play? Well, for example, if you have a player that's striking nonstop, it seems like no matter what they're doing, they just can't stop striking. And you have another player, and you happen to know their 2 release ratios, and let's say one's 2.5 to 1 and one's 3.5 to 1. And that player with the 2.5 to 1 is striking every ball, player with 3.5 to 1 just isn't striking. But somebody you have on your bench is right around that 2.5 to 1 range. And if they can repeat shots, their carry percentage is going to be better. So just simple in terms of who to play at certain given times. If you see some people really, really succeeding and their carry percentages are really out of this world, being able to bring in somebody off the bench who may be right around that rough release ratio is a great way. Lineup decisions. Everybody try and stack their lineup so people can get a read off of each other. Well, if you put a 4-to-1 release ratio and then follow it up with a 2-to-1 release ratio, those people aren't going to see the lane the same way at all. That person with 4-to-1 is going to see the lane as a lot slicker. The person with a 2-to-1 ratio is going to see the lane that the ball's trying to read a lot sooner. So just where you put people in the lineup. Decisions like that can be great for team play. It's something that we've used and we look at when making different selections for Team USA who travels to different events. So that is release ratio summary. So that gets us to, I'll stand this for just a second. That gets me to, and I hope I'm doing okay with time. This gets me to the last part of the presentation. Now, when I looked at those initial Earl videos that we recorded, where we're looking at how changing all the variables independently, how that affected how much change in motion we saw ball motion-wise. You know, how much did the ball hook when we had more or less rotation. So the last part is I said, well, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could have like a pocket control study? So I went and talked to the people at the research and spec side, and they, thankfully and luckily enough, allowed me to come in on a day off and kind of work with Earl. And sorry, we talk like he's a human, but we work with Earl, the man, not the robot, and able to really check how much variance do players have in changing their motion and changing their different ball variables to still be able to hit the pocket. So how much operator error can you really have and still hit the pocket, saying that you're repeating shots consistently? So you hit the same target, you throw at the same speed, but you meant to have 45 degrees of rotation. Well, if you have 60, are you still going to hit the pocket? So now we're not really looking as much front to back, we're looking more side to side. But the two most important things in bowling nowadays are controlling the pocket and making sure the ball's doing the right thing as it's on the lane. So I said, okay, well, we'll just put a house shot out there and see what it was. And then I started thinking, well, man, wouldn't it be great if we just started adding some stuff? You know, what if we tried it on one of the WTVA patterns, Stockholm? And let's try it, hey, if we're going to do a short pattern, we might as well do a medium. Then obviously, if we're going to do a medium, we have to do a long. Because really what I wanted to see is, do the variance levels change based on the patterns? So can I change rotation more or less on a specific length pattern versus another? Or can I change RPMs different? Or not change, but can I have more operator error? Can I have a bigger variance in what I'm trying to do?